The trade war with China back on, a major inflation number running hotter than expected, and the meme stock GameStop is ripping yet again. What's old is seemingly new. Coming up here on the Hill, if President Biden chastised Donald Trump's trade war with China, why did he just keep it and expand it? Plus, why is the Speaker of the House showing up outside of a New York courthouse? Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Look at this crew we have on this Tuesday. Hanging out with us, Scott Bolden, former D.C. Democratic Party chairman, NewsNation contributor. Ashley Davis, former George W. Bush White House official. Jonathan Cott, former senior advisor to Senator Joe Manchin. And Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House chief of staff, NewsNation contributor as well. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. Happy Tuesday.
Why is Scott in such a lousy mood? What is that?
Is he in a lousy mood?
I announced that before we started the show.
Well, I walked into the green room and Scott took exception to a live shot that I did here on NewsNation earlier.
I came on after you.
Yeah, Scott came right after me. I was like, nice to see you, Scott. Ro Khanna, congressman, coming up in about 5 minutes' time. Senator Ron Johnson here in about 15 minutes. Want to get into what's going on at Harvard. I just learned something about Jonathan Cott. Hot mic with Mick coming up as well. But first, here on the Hill, remember how awful that trade war was with China?
A lot of farmers are being hurt really badly, really badly. Farmers all across the country have been gutted by the president's broken promises and reckless trade war.
Guess what? It just might be back. Today, President Biden's administration announced it would be keeping the China tariffs from the Trump administration and adding on top of that some $18 billion in tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, along with amping up tariffs on other items like steel, aluminum, and lithium batteries. So, if it was bad then, how's it justified now? Here was the administration's top trade official.
In terms of the price that Americans paid for in the previous era, some of that, maybe a lot of it, was about the chaos and unpredictability that it created.
All right, Mick, is this trade war for thee but not for me?
Listen, this is not going to be the first politician who voted for something before they voted against something. I mean, politicians do change course all the time. The interview with the trade representative was not a good thing.
Catherine Tyra.
Yeah, she's probably not going to be on television again because what you can't say is, yeah, we're doing what we said we weren't going to do. What you do is say, well, the circumstances have changed, etc. This whole thing about a previous era. Is that how we're referring to Trump times now? I have no idea. Look,
I wish.
It's policy that is bipartisan. It's something that the American people support. It's probably the right move in terms of how to deal with China, who's never been a sort of a top-tier actor. You can't treat China like you do England or Brazil because they don't act like a first-tier nation. So you have to treat them differently. And the fact that the Biden administration has changed courses of action is probably something that was for the better.
I think maybe, but not completely. There's a dichotomy here between the chaos of Trump doing 2016 and beyond and what Biden is doing right now. He's doing it for different reasons, but more importantly, when Biden talks about broken promises, he talks about the commitment in a deal that Trump cut with China for China to buy $200 million worth of goods that never materialized. That's a big difference between what Biden's doing with the...
So then why not take off the tariffs?
That's not true. What Biden's doing is making a political move right now because obviously President Trump...
It can be both. It can be good for America and it can be political. It's an election year.
Agree, but he was much stronger on China. And there was a lot of chaos, but there had to be a lot of chaos. I mean, you have to rip the Band-Aid off. And we had no idea. You were there. I wasn't, but I saw it from the outside. Of companies such as Tesla that only like this widget was made in China and you had to make exceptions, but until you ripped the Band-Aid off, which Trump did and you did, then you didn't know what was going to happen. I actually think that he did something just like he did with the embassy in Israel.
This is an excellent point, by the way, that Ashley makes, because what Biden just did, and this is not going to get a lot of public attention, is stand up to a lot of the Fortune 100 CEOs who have been in his White House, in his Oval Office, saying, please don't do this, because it's going to hurt their business. We saw it all the time with Donald Trump, and he stood up to them as well. But you got to give Biden credit. Again, I think it's a decent policy.
So here's Jonathan, what China said. They said China opposes unilateral tariffs that violate the World Trade Organization rules and will take all measures necessary to defend our legitimate rights and interests. you expect that talk out of China, right? But is this just the first drip of a drip for what we could potentially get going on here in the upcoming months?
Yes, I'm sure China will push back on it. I think part of the problem with the Trump administration and the chaos was it was just sort of thrown out there at will whenever he felt like sending a tweet. I think what Biden has done is worked in a bipartisan way. You saw that when they passed the CHIPS bill. That was one of the most overwhelmingly bipartisan things that Congress has ever done, and we agreed on it. And to Mick's point, Biden is not protecting the Fortune 100 CEO companies. If you looked at what those tariffs protect, they protect the workers that are here and the manufacturing that we're going to get for the next 20 years. So I think that's where the difference is. But look, it is a bipartisan.
Well, we'll find out if it was chaos and if it's any different, because we'll see how the Chinese react. If the Chinese react the same as they did to us, then the chaos versus non-chaos doesn't make a difference.
What I can't figure out is the 100 CEOs who lobbied Trump and lobbied Biden don't do this, right? Still don't have equal access to the China market. They still have to transfer all of their IT and IP stuff to be in that market, yet they still want to be there because it's a huge market. But there's no progress in getting them in there. And so I don't know when or how you juxtapose don't do this and yet don't have as much to show for it if we don't do that to China.
All right, joining us now is the Democrat from the state of California, member of the China Select Committee. I believe a first-time appearance as well here on the Hill, Congressman Ro Khanna. Thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate the time, sir. You are for this. Tell us why.
Well, I think it is common sense bipartisan policy. I mean, for 40 years, we have had China take advantage of us, build up a massive trade deficit. We saw the hollowing out of steel, of aluminum, of industry after industry. And now there's an understanding that enough. We've got to have domestic capacity here. We need to become a manufacturing superpower again. And I'm glad there's some things that we have bipartisan consensus on.
So you, Congressman, were pretty critical of former President Trump for his policy when he was in office, August of 2020. You said of Trump, his pursuit of reckless, ego-driven trade policies has exacerbated the damage for American workers. You go on to say it's long past time we make our trade, economic, and tax policies work for working people. President Biden, Congressman, just kept the exact same policy in place. Are you disappointed that he did?
No, because I never had a problem with President Trump being tough on China. What I said is, did he have to be tough on Canada? Could we not have more alliances with some of our European allies and have a concerted effort against China? But I was actually complimentary of Lighthouser in the previous administration. I appreciated and voted for when he renegotiated NAFTA and supported that. But my view is that let's focus our fire on rebalancing the trade relationship with China. And there, I supported a lot of the previous president's policies on China tariffs.
All right, let me ask you about the political reform bill, Congressman, that you have put forth. It calls for example, banning stock trades for members of Congress, term limits as well, term limits after 12 years. I want to talk to you about stocks because they have been in the news the last couple days. I'll get to GameStop here in a second, but I know this is a big thing of yours. Unusual Whales. I'm sure you know the account, Congressman. It details nearly 3 dozen lawmakers last year who beat the S&P 500. 18 of them with gains of more than 50%. How are some members of Congress seemingly some of the best stock pickers on the planet?
Well, look, I'm for making sure that we ban stock trading of members of Congress, and it's bipartisan. I'm not even saying that all my colleagues who do it, that they're corrupt. I don't think that's the case. Some of them have access to some of the best financial firms. Those financial firms know how to beat the markets. I mean, people make a living of that in Wall Street. But the reality is that corruption? Most Americans don't. I'm sure there is some corruption, but I don't believe that the vast majority of people who come to Congress are corrupt or that I'm somehow holier than thou. I just think that most Americans believe that the system isn't working, and if one of the things we can do is stop trading stocks and have people put it in a diversified trust or have it independently managed instead of doing day trading, why not do that? I mean, why not get PAC money out of politics? Why not have some form of term limits? I think it'll increase the confidence in the system.
GameStop. So this thing has run up, Congressman, 3x in the last 2 days. Of course, Roaring Kitty came out of, I guess, self-retirement, posted a tweet, and this thing has ripped. As you know, Congress looked into this back in 2021. Do you think they need to, or is this just the free market at work?
Well, I think they should make sure that there's nothing illegal happening. But here's what's sad about this. This is financialization of our economy. The finances have gone out of control. And at the same time, we don't make steel enough in America anymore. We've gone from making half the world's steel to now China making half the world's steel, and we're at 4%. We don't make even advanced drugs in this country. I mean, look at all the antibiotics that we're dependent on foreign countries, or the active pharmaceutical ingredients. And I think at some point this country, we need to say that we need to invest not just in gaming apps, but in making things in this country.
Okay.
Have the strategic tariffs, but have federal financing to build things with the private sector. That's what Hamilton did, what Lincoln did, what FDR did, and that's, I hope, what we can come together as a country on.
Congressman, we have to leave it there. Ro Khanna, Democrat from New York. We hope you come on back here on the Hill.
Pretty sure he's from California.
Did I say New York? Oh, gosh, California. The big Democratic state on the other side of the country. There we go. Congressman Khanna from California. Thank you, sir.
He's such a good number.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. The meme stock, poster boy, it's back. After a series of tweets from the man known as Roaring Kitty, driving shares of GameStop, which roughly tripled in the last 2 days. Keith Gill, otherwise known as Roaring Kitty, led the first surge in GameStop in 2021 with his analysis on the Reddit forum Wall Street Bets. So I talked to asked the congressman about this. You're smart. Why?
I'm smirking because I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you own any of this?
I don't own GameStop, no.
Do you day trade at all?
No.
Okay, because it's like we can't do a show now without Bitcoin or without Roaring Kitty.
This is one of the biggest stories out. This is one of the biggest stories out there.
There's no question about it. So.
Do you think it was off limits to ask the congressman?
Absolutely not. No, I think it was a good question. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Okay.
So
no, he thinks you're a day trader.
No, I
and
don't.
You're behind this. That you're really Roaring Kitty.
You think Congress is going to jump in again?
I don't know, but I actually think if there's nothing illegal happening, I think this is why Robinhood and other day trading platforms happen, and I actually think it's great. I mean, I was saying yesterday on the show that my son wanted to do it, so I gave my son money to put in today. I mean, like, who knows?
I was going to let you say it, not me. I don't know any, but there's some in the
Well, I know it's like $100. I'm going to make like 101, but I mean, like, it's not like, why not? But it's teaching him how to trade at 15.
I use Robinhood, and I do some day trading, not to that level, but I didn't do it when I was a staffer in Congress, privy to some knowledge. Even if it was a day before, an hour before the public, you can't do that.
So to answer your question, when I worked at a business network, I wouldn't day trade. Right?
Yeah.
Because, you don't want to trade stock X, then all of a sudden you're sitting in the White House briefing room, and that becomes an issue, and then you're conflicted.
But Jonathan makes a really good point, because there was a perception for a long time that insider trading was legal if you're a member of Congress or a staffer. Right. It's not. It's always been illegal. I remember there's a Nancy Pelosi interview on another network 5 years ago when she talked about insider information, and we got a memo in our desk the next Monday. It said, by the way, you may have seen the 60 Minutes interview. Just to be clear, insider trading is against the law, even if you're a member of Congress.
But doesn't everything have to go into blind trust when you become members, or is that just the White House?
No.
I mean, when I was in the White House,
the rules are different. The White House, it's not a blind trust. You're just not allowed to own individual equities. The rules are different for the White House, and they are in Congress, which is part of the problem.
All right, still to come here from the Hill on NewsNation over the next 46 minutes. Why one NFL team is going to be the focus of a congressional hearing tomorrow. How a senator from Montana has his eyes on one of the NFL's most storied franchises. Plus, did Harvard just cave? What the university reportedly agreed to with protesters just days before commencement. But first, on the other side of the break, why did the Speaker of the House just show up outside the courthouse in Donald Trump's New York trial? What did he say? Senator Ron Johnson joins us live. Other side of the break when the Hill returns.
The judicial system in our country has been weaponized against President Trump. The system is using all the tools at its disposal right now to punish one president and provide cover for another.
That, of course, is the House Speaker Mike Johnson in New York City earlier today. He is the latest high-profile Republican the highest profile Republican at this point, to join former President Trump at his criminal trial. Among other allies accompanying the former president and Speaker Johnson, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, and the Florida Congressman Byron Donalds and Corey Mills. Joining us now is the Republican senator from the state of Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson. Senator, thanks so much for being with us once again here on the Hill. I wonder what you made of the House Speaker, the top Republican here in Washington, Mike Johnson, going.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that he did. As members of Congress, we take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. And that's one of the ways we do it, by using the bully pulpit that we have, our platform, to call out when we see abuses of the Constitution. That's what's going on right now. I don't think anybody, any fair observer, would take a look at this trial and call it anything but a travesty, a partisan witch hunt, election interference. That's what's happening. And so the Speaker and other members of Congress and other elected officials, politicians, are going up to New York because President Trump can't defend himself. He's under a gag order. So other people are going there and pointing out what a travesty this is to our rule of law, to our system of justice. That's what it is.
Senator, do you feel the need to go? Do you have any plans to go?
Well, I think other people are making the point. So I'll let them do it. I've got, right now I'm here in Washington, D.C. We have other things to do, but I'm here on your show making those exact same points. The American people need to understand what's happening here. I think more and more of them are waking up to the way that President Biden has weaponized the entire federal government. One thing we don't talk about is how he's tasked his agencies to register voters. Now, do you think they're going to go into Republican strongholds? No, they're going to register voters in a highly partisan fashion. His open borders are changing the electorate of this country and causing a clear and present danger to America. So, again, what we do is we have to call out these outrages so more of the public is awakened to the destruction of democratic governance and how President Biden has put this country on a very dangerous path. It is President Biden that's a danger to democracy by weaponizing these federal agencies, including his Justice Department.
Congressman or Senator, I know you got to run here, but I want to ask you: do you think what you're seeing at the courthouse right now with these members of the Republican Party, Congress, former presidential candidates showing up, also doubles as a way for them to try to get their way into a potential Trump administration?
Again, I'm not going to try and second guess what their motivation for being in New York, but again, I appreciate that they're doing that. Somebody has to point out what is happening to our government, and I'm glad that they're doing so. I'm trying to do the same thing.
Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, I know you're up against a time crunch. We appreciate the time, sir. Talk to you again soon.
Have a good evening.
You too. All right, so following his day in court, Donald Trump will focus on his presidential campaign. Tonight, he will attend a major fundraiser in Manhattan. NewsNation has told the North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, and the Florida Senator Marco Rubio are all expected to attend. Nick? You said yesterday this was in...
Where do you want to start?
You said this wasn't VP Apprentice Edition, however you want.
Well, it's not for Mike Johnson, obviously.
Of course.
And I respect what Senator Johnson said about it. I think it's a little bit beneath the office. I mean,
for Mike Johnson.
For Mike Johnson to show up, just because he's the Speaker of the House, he's going to get the media attention. The message is right, which is it's the weaponization. I get that. I agree with the message. And I agree with Ron Johnson that we need to talk about it more. But there's no reason for Mike Johnson to go to New York to do that. He's the Speaker of the House, for goodness sake. He can have a media gaggle tonight on the steps if he wants to. Vivek Ramaswamy is looking for a camera because no one will talk to him if he's not with Donald Trump. So again, not a bad move. I'm not sure if I'm advising the Speaker of the House if that's really the smart move. The thing at the fundraiser tonight is VP on parade. I mean, that's what it looks like.
I agree with you about the Speaker Johnson. And the talking points, I think about personal responsibility. Why is the Speaker of the House or any senator or House representative making their way to New York, other than for political reasons? But it shows how far the Republican Party has sunk into Trumpism. That someone is on trial for 34 felony charges for paying off a stripper or whatever you would call her, and then burying it illegally. And there's a law that says you can't do that. And he's standing trial, not at the federal level, at the state level. And many business leaders have been convicted of the same charges. That Trumpism has now allowed the Speaker of the House to come and go out, stand outside and do talking points about his innocence and weaponization of a criminal justice system that is just holding him as accountable as anybody else.
I think Mick would agree with you, and Mick just said it, that maybe it's beneath the Speaker of the House. You agree?
I said more to what Mick said. I said more to what Mick said.
But I also think that the Trump came out to support the Speaker a couple weeks ago, and so it is political. It is, and I don't think it's right. I agree with Mick.
The 100%. Sinking of the GOP to this level, to this corruption, this crassness, this craziness of Donald Trump.
I'm just going to say,
and there's no other way to call that, Mick. Really?
We'll see what happens the next time that when the shoe is on the other foot and there's a Democrat being charged with something is outrageous.
Well, I can name Democrats charged right now.
I am confident.
Menendez, Cuellar, go right ahead.
I am confident Joe Biden will never be charged with paying off.
Exactly.
But I also am longing for the Republican parties of George W. Bush and Mitt Romney, who spoke about family values and morality.
This is a longer conversation.
Right, but we're having a Speaker of the House who had an accountability app that he shared with his son, so they didn't look at any racy photos on their phone. Going to a trial with a porn star, that's a little weird.
So I want to key in on something that you said, though. You think this is VP on parade?
I think the thing tonight is, certainly Burgum is there for VP. I guess Byron Donalds is. We haven't given him serious thought. Maybe we should start doing that.
Okay.
Vivek Ramaswamy is looking for a cabinet position, and the fundraiser tonight would be the traditional place. The fundraiser is a traditional place to come and sort of do this sort of thing, right? I think it's the more appropriate place than the courtroom.
But Tim Scott, and I said this last night too, I mean, Tim Scott is actually there because all those are really high donors. He's going to be probably chair of the banking committee, and I mean, he has a reason to be there outside of the VP.
I think the lowest 100%. Dollar amount tonight is 100,000, by the way.
I think
it goes all the way up, up to 8 something. All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill. Hot mic with Mick, about 10 minutes away. And on the other side of the break, did Harvard just cave? You're watching the Hill here on NewsNation. We're back in a few. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. Harvard is set to have its commencement in a week's time, but before then, it seemingly caved. Harvard now striking a deal with anti-Israel protesters to end their encampment on campus. Today's announcement comes nearly 3 weeks after protesters took over the iconic Harvard Yard. The university agreeing to reinstate students suspended during the protest and open up discussions about a potential divestment from Israel. When you talk about divesting from Israel, the Anti-Defamation League describes that as anti-Semitic. Why would Harvard engage with this?
I think there's too many protests for them to handle, and it's just disrupting the day-to-day activities and preventing students who go there who don't agree with these pro-Hamas protesters to walk to class. I mean, we saw this in California. I think it was on USC's campus. A Jewish student couldn't get to class because these protesters wouldn't let him.
But why put divestment on the table?
They shouldn't. They're caving to the protesters, and I think it's pathetic that they're doing it.
It's on the table for discussion. And it's far more complicated. And I think you got pro-Palestinian, and you even have Jewish student protests who are humanitarian and don't like how the war is being implemented. That doesn't make them anti-Semitic or pro-Hamas. But these students are investors and owners of this university. Their parents pay. The government pays for them to be there. And unless you're going to violently remove them, then you really don't have much choice but to negotiate with them. And they didn't agree to divest, by the way. They said we open up discussions to divest. If that gets them to a peaceful resolution and graduation and clearing the Harvard Yard, that's not a bad deal.
Harvard Office of the President, I will facilitate a meeting with the chair of the Corporation Committee on Shareholder Responsibility and other university officials to address questions about the endowment. Scott talked about forcible removal. Mm-hmm. You've had an experience.
Sorry.
Jonathan just showed me the video of which you literally forcibly remove someone at Harvard. You're a right hand to Senator Joe Manchin. Explain what happened.
These protesters are taking too much liberty with our freedom of expression. You can protest and you can make your case. You can't do it violently. You can't attack elected officials. You can't attack anybody.
So tell me what happened. You were there in
an unofficial capacity. I just went up as a friend of Joe Manchin, and a protester ran into his face, got too close to him, and was screaming at him, and I stepped in between and forcibly removed him.
Forcibly removed.
And from the video that you showed, looks like you saved the senator from doing the same thing, because the senator was going to do it.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that you didn't get any blowback. So I totally support you, by the way.
I didn't get any blowback, and I'm surprised, but I think it's because these types of protesters have gone too far. 2 weeks later, they caused an all-out brawl when Senator Murkowski was getting an award in D.C. They've attacked members of Congress and try to stop them from even walking to the floor to vote or getting up and giving speeches. It's just gone too far, and I think we have to rein it back in. And remember, we have freedom of speech and freedom of expression, but you can't yell fire in a movie theater, and you can't attack people.
You have a degree from Harvard.
I do, and if I was going to speak to them tonight, I'd tell them. By the way, they have not reached out to me after last night's show to invite me to speak.
Harvard, still available. Harvard College has their commencement address in a week's time. They still don't have a speaker for that. Go on.
I can clear my calendar.
I'll help write this speech.
I'd love to speak to that group. I would do that one for free.
Trump, White House Chief of Staff, gives commencement address at Harvard. Go on.
That's exactly right.
I'd be in the front row if you spoke.
Yeah, I may have to hire you to defend me afterwards. But here's how this all ties back into Washington, D.C. There are going to be hearings on exactly this. The Harvard Corporation is going to get hauled in front of the Education Committee, in at least the House and probably in the Senate, to figure out what's going on. This is now a bipartisan thing in Washington, D.C. There's enough Democrats in the Senate who don't like what's going on as well. So these folks are sitting here going, we're going to, are we caving to the students? Who knows? Are they going to ultimately divest? Who knows? What I do know, they're coming down to talk about it.
A story from the Wall Street Journal that just popped. Headline, Biden moves forward on $1 billion in new arms for Israel. Is that just going to further, are we going to get more protests, or is it, school's out for the summer,
well, I think
we're off these campuses?
Because of the bill that the House Republicans are bringing up, but I also do not think that that's anywhere near all the money that was allocated. So if I remember correctly, there's still the certain warfare methods that have not been.
Yeah, Wall Street Journal reports $700 million in tank ammunition, $500 million in tactical vehicles, $60 million in mortar.
So here's the deal on that, is that, when Biden announced he was withholding some of the funds this week, keep in mind, that's what they impeached Donald Trump for, was withholding funds. What not enough people talked about was they can't do that. That's an impoundment, which is against the law, the Budget Control Act of 1973, okay? They would have had to spend the money by the end of September anyway. There are certain exceptions on foreign policy, and an administration has a little bit more control over spending money on foreign policy than they do on domestic, but it's really hard not to spend money that Congress has told you to spend. So this doesn't surprise me at all. What surprised me is that they made the announcement they were withholding the money in the first place, just because they can't back that up. They can't keep that forever.
Well, but it's messaging, too. They weren't going to send over 2,000-pound bombs because they thought that was too dangerous, given how heavily populated Rafah was at the time. Now, this is tanks and kind of softer other hardware. And so, listen, Biden's a supporter of Israel. He's trying to thread the needle. It's like he pisses off the left one day and then the right the next day. And
you're
that's
okay
how he
saying that. It's okay.
Am I really?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. No. It makes me mad. Forgive me.
There you go.
Forgive me, Mom.
At least it wasn't the F-bomb.
No. But that's how he's threading the needle and hoping that he keeps enough support to win.
All right. Also today, the Secretary of State Anthony Blinken on a surprise trip to Ukraine as U.S. military aid arrives there after Congress approved some $60 billion of support. The Secretary of State touted the aid and gave this message to the Ukrainian people.
You are not alone. The United States has been by your side from day one. We are with you today, and we will stay by your side until Ukraine's security, its sovereignty, its ability to choose its own path is guaranteed.
All right, so that's the Secretary of State in Ukraine today. He was obviously there speaking with Vladimir Zelensky, made some headlines, as you might imagine, on a surprise trip. And then this happened. Watch. Do we have it? Stand by, they're telling me.
Oh my goodness. Do you know the song?
So that's the secretary.
I know the song.
What is it?
Keep on rocking in the free world.
That's
the Secretary of State in Kyiv earlier today. Around the table we go. What do you see there?
What do I see is I need to text Mike Pompeo and find out if he's got those kinds of skills.
Yeah,
I love it. I love that kind of stuff. I really do. I think that type of soft diplomacy helps in ways that listen, we're human beings at the end of the day, right? That's kind of fun. It's kind of nice, and hopefully good things will come from it.
And look, the message, keep on rocking in the free world, was an excellent song choice by it.
He went up 20 points in my book, but he also, I'm thinking, I could never be Secretary of State because I have no skills.
Yeah.
What do you see there?
I was hoping that he would be singing versus the guy that was singing. But he seems to be keeping beat. He knows what he's doing with the bass guitar, I think. So, all good.
What do you say to the folks who might look at that and say, "Come on, going over there, doing that"?
No, this gets a pat on the back. When this is above and beyond. This is because listen, you screw it up, people make fun of you for the next 20 years.
Right.
So, when Bill Clinton played his saxophone, people look at him and go, you know what? That makes him kind of cool.
Do they know over at the White House, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Kyiv and I'm going to rock out in a bar. Or does he just get to do this?
Maybe. I don't know.
I'm sure he's probably talked about it before, but there's a really good chance. Listen, if you're the Secretary of State in a foreign country, first, it's not a surprise trip. Okay, you don't do those types of things. It just was a surprise to the media. That's exactly right. You don't just walk into a bar and pick up a guitar. All right, and again, I like it. I think it's a great move, but it's not something you don't have the luxury of being spontaneous when you are the Secretary of State in visiting Ukraine.
All right, coming up, still from the Hill, Hot Mike with Mick. You want to talk Republicans or football more?
I want to go back and talk about Roaring Kitty. No, I'm
Roaring Kitty. I'll talk Roaring Kitty all day.
I know you will.
He's busting me. Hot Mike with Mick. Other side of the break, you're watching the Hill. Roaring Kitty. I promise you, it's interesting.
Special guest Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
The one and only.
TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
If you disagree with me, you're not even listening to what I'm saying.
Tonight at 8/7 Central.
It's good to see you, big man.
Only on NewsNation.
And chess club president in high school. Mick tells us what he's hearing and what he's thinking. All right.
Let's heat it up in here, Berman. It's freezing in here.
It is cold in the studio.
Club president?
I was chess club president.
Yeah, he was. Only human to have
that.
all of those titles. Yes. All right. Donald Trump beating President Biden 5 out of the 6 key swing states, according to the New York Times poll released over the weekend. But the X factor is potentially RFK Jr., Kennedy polling at 10%. 44% of his supporters saying that their vote for him is more of a vote against the other candidates. What does this tell you, Mulvaney?
Nothing, because they don't tell us, that poll doesn't tell us who the other candidates are for those voters. It doesn't make any difference what percentage of the vote that Robert F. Kennedy pulls. It could be 2, it could be 22. Doesn't make any difference. Well, if he's 44, he wins.
Well, there you go. All right.
Below 35, right. But it's who he pulls it from. If he pulls 22% and pulls 11 from each, then it's a non-issue. If he pulls 2%, but that's all from Joe Biden, then Donald Trump is going to win the election. And again, this comes back down to the swing state.
2%?
Yeah, if he pulls 2%, you pull 2% from Joe Biden in Michigan, and Joe Biden loses Michigan. That's a lot of votes.
I'm just doing
other swing states.
I'm doing some back of the envelope math here, but let's just say he's running at 15%, 44% are voting against other candidates. That is, in theory, persuadable voters, right? Like they could be moved, and maybe that's 5 to 6% of the electorate, or not necessarily.
Yeah, that's a great question for Steyerwalt, because he gets into that a little bit deeper. My point would be, look, we know there's going to be people voting against other people, right? My theory, and I know my Democrat friends cringe when I say this, nobody voted for Joe Biden. They either voted for Donald Trump or against Donald Trump. People vote against folks all of the time. The thesis has always been that there's always more positive energy to vote for something than against. I think that's different now, and this voting against other people is becoming a bigger part of our process.
I voted for Joe Biden. I remember. So did I. For him. I'm going to vote for him again.
Those who voted against Donald Trump.
But you only had one vote.
Yeah, I probably
and if you got 2, Donald Trump will come after you, I promise you.
But I do think that your analysis works best when you look at the swing states and where they're pulling from. Because nationally, he can pull whatever he's going to pull. But those swing states and where they really need to win, if Trump beats that thin blue wall or that thick blue wall of voters, then Trump's going to win. If he even puts a dent in it, if he wins a couple of those, I think we're in trouble as Democrats.
The biggest news regarding Robert F. Kennedy in the last 30 days was the news about him making the ballot in Michigan. Okay? Making the ballot in Texas, which I think happened in the last 24 hours.
It's in Arizona, too, though.
It doesn't make any difference. Arizona matters. Michigan matters.
He may make Pennsylvania soon.
Really?
He's what?
Yeah. He may make Pennsylvania soon.
And you talk about Michigan, Pennsylvania. That's probably what it all.
Wisconsin?
Yeah,
I think it was discussing about getting on with a third party in Wisconsin.
Yeah, but what if he pulls from Trump in red states, though? Why isn't that more relevant program material than him pulling in swing states?
Because if Trump's going to win a red state, if he's going to win South Carolina by 15 points, who cares?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
He's not going to take enough.
All right, well, back here in Washington, the Commanders, the NFL team, fighting to build a new stadium at the old site, or the site of the old RFK Stadium.
The different RFK,
different
right?
RFK, yep.
Yeah, okay.
But they've encountered some resistance in the form of the senator from Montana, Steve Daines, blocking a bill that would give Washington, D.C. greater control of the site, at least until the Commanders honor a Native American that helped design the team's old logo. You were telling us earlier that this issue about the stadium, like you guys were talking about this in the White House.
Yeah, and Scott probably knows more about this than I do because he's local, but what to do with the stadium has been a big deal for a long time. I think the team has been gone now for more than 20 years. It's a fabulous piece of property, and we tried to cut a deal with the city when I was running OMB to take over the city's lease so that we could sell that piece of property and redevelop it. We're going to swap them out a park that they want in downtown Washington, D.C., and that simply just fell apart. It's almost like nothing can go right with this stadium. But now you've got a senator coming in, and this is what senators do. This problem gets solved. Right. I mean, they're going to come in and say, please give some credit to the family that helped design the logo, and that absolutely will happen. Right. But that's a small sort of hiccup.
That's like the next step in or a very small piece in a big puzzle.
And Senator Daines has a huge Native American population in Montana. Right. And I don't know this 100% that whatever tribe that this is that helped make the logo, but I'm assuming he's sticking up for his local tribe in Montana. And then once there's a deal that's cut, which I'm assuming there will be, his hold will lift.
All politics is local, even if it's Montana to D.C.
Right. We won't be talking about
this.
We're going to be talking about where the Redskins' new stadium is going to be, which is always a big issue. Commanders. Forgive me.
You need to go to bed and wake up tomorrow night, sir, and not
Maryland, D.C., or Virginia, all three want the Commanders.
That is Hot Mike with Mick. Thank you, sir. By the way, did you see this? In what may be the luckiest moment of his life, a baseball fan at last night's Mariners game caught 2 foul balls on back-to-back pitches. Watch.
The 1-1. Again, this one a little straightened out a little bit more. Let's see. Into the corner. What we got? He's got both! He got them both!
That seat is?
No. What's
Do you
that
remember
seat?
That's Bartman. That's the Bartman.
But I think that was that in Chicago or?
Well, it's a different stadium, but that was the seat that Steve Bartman. Steve Bartman was in. I didn't see the video. Go ahead.
No, go on. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, Bartman was the guy who leaned over into.
Trust me, I'm a Marlins fan. I know. I was sitting there jumping around during it all. But how wild is that? Sitting there in the same seat and back-to-back foul balls.
I have been to hundreds of baseball games. I've never even come close to catching a foul ball.
One.
This guy catches 2 back-to-back.
Right.
Well, it doesn't look like there's that many guests there, so maybe the odds were
I want him to play my lottery numbers.
There you go, exactly. I think so do a lot of people. All right, so it is primary day down the road from us here in Washington and in the states of Maryland and West Virginia. From our hill to yours now. Hello to those watching us on NewsNation or listening to us on SiriusXM in Oak Hill, West Virginia. That is a city located about an hour outside of the state capital, Charleston, and is represented by Congresswoman Republican Carol Miller. In 2020 and 2016, as you might expect, Donald Trump overwhelmingly won the state of West Virginia. By the way, Oak Hill viewers are served by our next star station, WVNS. Hello from our hill to yours in Oak Hill. Tell me about it.
Oak Hill is a beautiful place. It's home to the newest national park, New River Gorge. My first experience in West Virginia was at Charlie's Pub down there, where I had my first drink of moonshine. But it is a beautiful place.
What was the name of the game you played?
Pass out the Yankee, and I learned I was the Yankee.
And but now you're never buying a drink?
Never going back
moonshine
there.
At that bar ever again.
But I encourage people to go. It's a beautiful town.
It's not illegal there.
No.
You don't know you were a Yankee until after the game, right?
Until the next day.
All right, coming up here on the Hill, can the government tell the major airlines how they should charge customers? Remember all those junk fees that supposedly are going away? Well, now the airlines are fighting back. Leland Vittert joins us on the other side of the break. You're watching the Hill. All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye. The major airliners are now suing the Biden administration over a new rule that cracks down on flight and baggage fees. The airline group says this is all, quote, an attempt to regulate private business operations in a thriving marketplace. They say it's beyond its authority. Now, the U.S. Department of Transportation claims that flyers are currently overpaying $543 million in fees a year, and that this new rule would save consumers just about that amount, $500 million bucks. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. Hello. I always thought that, first off, you knew this was going to get challenged, but these are private businesses, and yes, it's a great headline for the president to come in and say, fees gone.
Yeah, when you're in politics, always be for puppies and against airlines. It's very simple.
Puppies good, airlines bad.
Yeah, you will never go wrong. Few better things could happen for Joe Biden than being sued by the airlines for cracking down on them.
I just wonder though, like where the line is on this.